From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. I promised we'd talk about the elections and the presidential race. There's no turning away from it. Let me say, first of all, because I haven't really talked about it too much regarding elections, I did mention it when it happened. Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin, has new state legislative maps. And it's been approved by the state legislature, and it's been signed by Governor Evers, and it's a done deal. It happened pretty quickly. Of course, we know last spring, I guess it was, I forget, we had the special election for that vacant state Supreme Court seat, and Justice Protasewicz was the deciding vote now, and finally, after all this time, declaring the current Wisconsin maps unconstitutional because they were gerrymandered so severely. Everybody knew it, but it took finally that deciding vote on the Supreme Court to rule that way. And and now here we go. So there were competing maps. There were 3 or 4 different competing maps. Of course, the Republicans submitted, and that was never going to happen because they kept their gerrymandered advantage. The Democrats offered. Some mathematicians got together and offered, and there was another independent commission. I forget which one passed, but Robin Vos, the leader of the assembly leader in the Wisconsin Assembly, said, "Okay, well, guys." To his fellow Republicans, this is the best deal we're going to get. This one looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and pass it. Boom, 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 done. Everybody was kind of surprised at how quickly it went. And I myself was a little suspicious. Like, what are you guys up to? Why are you accepting this so easily? Why are you calling the vote on this? The great news is that it happened. Everybody's universally thrilled about it. But I couldn't help being a little suspicious as to why the Republicans gave in so quickly. I guess they just saw the writing on the wall. They figured that was the best deal they were going to get. The bottom line is, by all accounts, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel did a pretty thorough analysis and have told us that, X amount of districts lean Democratic, X amount lean Republican, X amount are toss-ups, and it all looks pretty even. So both parties, that is both major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, have a pretty much even chance of taking control of the state legislature. If you listen to this program, I've mentioned before that Wisconsin voters have been electing Democrats to statewide offices pretty consistently. Protasewicz, as I just mentioned, and the governor, and Democrats seem to have a slight advantage whenever it's a statewide race. But of course, because of the gerrymandered maps, the Republicans had a supermajority for quite a while in the state legislature. So now they're in place for this upcoming election. And in 2024, it's not likely, but it's possible that the Democrats could actually take control of both houses. We'll see. But we've got fair maps in Wisconsin. What do you know? And my suspicions aside, I can't help but be a little suspicious of the Republicans being so quick to say okay. But there we are. All right. In the most recent elections here, since last we spoke, South Carolina and Michigan have weighed in. South Carolina, of course, there's not really a primary going on for the Democrats. President Biden got like 90% or something, so we're not really watching that. South Carolina GOP primary was about 60-40 approximately, Trump over Nikki Haley, which the only thing I'll say about that is, Trump is an incumbent for all intents and purposes, right? He's the GOP incumbent. He was the last Republican president. So for him to only get 60 to Nikki Haley's 40, I would say that's a very weak showing for an incumbent, which he is. He's basically an incumbent. So there's that. My first thought is, well, that doesn't speak very well for his general election chances when 40% of his own party in South Carolina is voting against him. It was a lot better in Michigan, where it was the numbers were 68-27. 68% to Trump, 27% to Nikki Haley. A little wider margin there. The other thing, too, this was an interesting thing that I heard one pundit mention, that so far, Iowa, Nevada, who else had, is that it? Is that everybody? Iowa, Nevada, South Carolina, Michigan. There might be one or two more in there that I can't remember. But anyway, I pointed out that Trump had been consistently polling this prior to the votes about 10% higher than the actual votes that came in. So like in South Carolina, he was polling like 70-30, and it wound up 60-40. And similar in all prior of these primaries so far, polling higher than the actual vote counts. Until Michigan, where that pattern kind of stopped. I think he was polling like 30 at least ahead, and he wound up winning by over 40 percentage points. So we'll see if that trend, if this was a bump in the road, if that trend continues, or if it's over. But I found it pretty interesting when you're polling 10 points higher than the vote count. That also is something that seems very interesting when you're looking ahead to the general election. So there you go. The story, of course, in Michigan on the Democratic side is that 13% of the vote went to uncommitted. And that, of course, was the movement by Michigan voters to send a message to President Biden that, you know what, we cannot accept the policy in Gaza. And so they got a movement together there to say, all right, to send this message, vote uncommitted. And 13% is pretty substantial. Of course, Joe wound up getting 81% of the vote. So there's really no mystery. And I got to say, too, the reason I think, if you're really just panicking about the Orange Menace winning in the poll war against Genocide Joe so far, really for the last over a year, it's just been all about the Republicans. You know, DeSantis was the big thing for a while, and you know, before the primaries actually started, and really up until now, there's only one story in the news. It's just all about the Republicans. They're getting all the attention. And Genocide Joe, except for the bad stuff, the age issue and the Gaza thing, getting zero attention. It's only been very recently with Gaza that he's getting attention, and it's all bad. The point being, it's a media-driven world, and the GOP is getting all the attention. So I'm not really surprised that the polls are going to favor the Republicans. They're getting all the heat. They're getting all the attention. They're getting all the buzz. So I think when Joe's campaign begins, and it really hasn't, he's got the State of the Union next week, Super Tuesday coming up, and again, primaries don't mean much for that side of the aisle. But once Super Tuesday happens, and it's a done deal as far as the GOP nominee. I mean, it's already a done deal, but let's kind of put a seal on it and make it official. I think once the general campaign begins, we're going to see those numbers shift. And I don't mean to be overly optimistic about it, but I have a very hard time imagining that those polls won't change drastically. And by the time November runs around, and blame me if I'm jinxing it now, I will not at all be surprised if it's an absolute landslide runaway for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. I mean, come on. And plus, we haven't even begun the criminal trials yet. The civil trials have all come down against him. Obviously, the E. Jean Carroll decision of $83+ million, the New York financial fraud. I mean, all told, he's got $500 million in fines. He's been found liable for rape. And, you know, the whole civil versus criminal thing, you can't say guilty. Well, I can say guilty. I'm not going to be hamstrung by legal technicalities. He's been held liable. That's the legal word for it, because you can't say guilty. There's no guilt in a civil trial, there's only liability. But okay, just person to person using simple English language, he's been found guilty of rape. Come on. How do you get past that? And of course, I know, yeah, you do get past it with his crazy base. But this is all just to say the general election hasn't begun. When it does, I'm pretty optimistic. I know you're scared, and we should be scared because he's an awful guy. What else do I need to say about this? Oh, Nikki Haley. Yeah, of course she's still in. Why not? Where else is she going to go? She's got nothing else going on. As long as she's got money. The Koch brothers backed out, but I noticed in the media they still call them the Koch brothers, even though one of them's dead. And I keep falling over myself trying to be more accurate about that, more precise in my language. And I always forget which one of them died. I think it's Charles. I don't even want to guess because I forget which one died and which one's alive. But the surviving Koch brother and the organization that they put together, their political PAC, has been backing Nikki Haley. And they have decided, nope, that's done now. So, yeah, maybe she's gone pretty soon. But as long as she's got money, of course she should stay in. It only makes sense. I mean, the guy is 77, 78 years old. He could fall down dead any day. He's got all of these trials coming up. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 8.5 months? So, of course, she should stay in. She'd be crazy not to. Everybody telling her to drop out. Why? Why should she drop out? As long as she can pay the bills, as long as her campaign can keep the lights on, by all means, Nikki, what the hell? Why not? By the way, can we also, we tend to just forget about this, but I feel like sometimes we need a reminder about just the really obvious stuff. Like, the really oily, shiny, bright orange makeup that he wears and the weirdest comb over in the history of comb overs. We tend to just look past that now. I know it seems petty, but I just feel like every once in a while I need to remind us because it's kind of symbolic of the way he gets normalized. The insane, crazy things and racist things and convoluted and just bizarre things that come out of his mouth every single goddamn day hardly even get any attention anymore. Do you remember that word cloud that came out a few months ago? I think it was right around Christmas. He didn't create it. Somebody else created it. It was a word cloud of his upcoming possible, next administration. So people are asking, what do you think of Donald Trump and a possible second term? And everybody answered with a word, and they made a word cloud. You know what these word clouds are, right? The ones that are most prominently mentioned are larger in this graphic. Well, the largest words were power, revenge, and dictatorship. And then dictator is also in there, pretty prominent. Power, revenge, dictatorship. And the Orange Menace actually forwarded this as though it's something to brag about. So it's just to say, what are we doing? Ignoring the bizarreness of this guy. And the fact that he wants to be an autocrat. We spent quite a lot of time last week, most of last week's episode, talking about this kind of weird worldwide phenomenon of autocrats and wannabe dictators. And he's right in line. I've mentioned this before, and I think we really should spend some time talking about it, is America really needs a leftist party. There is no left in America. But the right is so over the top and gaining power, and has been really ever since Reagan, because the left that doesn't exist, the so-called left, really the centrist Democrats, every time they compromise with the crazy right, they move the political center to the right, which only makes the political class more conservative as a whole, and it empowers the far right to be even crazier and crazier. So much of the blame for the current crazy right is the tepid, impotent American so-called left, which ain't left at all. They're just centrists. While the Republicans go off the deep end. Somebody called themselves the subversive lens. I don't know this person, but listen to this. We can't always control what individuals choose to align themselves with our group, but at a certain threshold and a certain quantity, it is time for unflinching introspection. At some point, tolerating misbehavior becomes endorsement. The current GOP is the party of violent insurrectionists, white supremacists, and conspiracy crackpots, not because each member is necessarily, but because these attitudes and behaviors are clearly not disqualifying. The Republican Party, as presently constituted, deserves to be symbolically burned to the ground. Its piles of ashes should remain untouched, not to serve as the site where a mythical bird will arise, reborn, but as a historical monument, a reminder that bigotry, sedition, and sustained deception will not be tolerated. That's where we are. That's where the Republican Party is. I've said for quite a while, if you have an R next to your name, you are responsible for this. You cannot continue to align yourselves with these people. And example after example after example. The Alexander Smirnov story, of course, he's the FBI agent who's now been indicted for lying. He made up the Hunter Biden stories. Speaking of the international movement, Israel is a cautionary tale. I've learned some things about Israel that I didn't know prior to the whole tragedy in Gaza. The right wing, we've known for a long time the Likud party is right wing, and in his latest effort to be elected, Netanyahu had to align himself with really far right wackos. So we knew that. But here's what I've learned. The right wing in Israel has controlled education to the point now where polls show that the younger you are, the more right wing you are. This is what they're telling us. This is what this research is telling us. The majority of Israelis now want the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to be even more harsh in Gaza. They think they're not being tough enough. They favor settler colonialism. They favor the apartheid regime. We're talking about Israeli citizens now. It wasn't that long ago when you could point to Israel and you could criticize the government and you could say, well, see, most of their own population isn't even for this. But that's not the case anymore because they've got the youth. And as they grow into adulthood, after decades of control, where they teach the kind of things that MAGA Republicans want to teach in our schools, they want to take away anything that sniffs of the left or inclusion or diversity or, what they call critical race theory. They want to teach patriotism. If you're worried about what could happen in America, look at Israel. It's not just the right-wing government anymore. It's the people. That comfort I always had about separating party leadership from the people, that's no longer there, that separation. They're one and the same. And this is exactly what the Republicans are trying to do here. This the way they're taking advantage and exploiting this killing of that Georgia nursing student, just despicable. Because, again, all the research shows the same thing, that migrants, whether legal or illegally arrived in this country, are better behaved than native-born Americans. There's less crime among that population. They work harder. Just by every measure, if we emptied out the native-born and had only immigrants, this country would be safer and harder working. They win on every score. But they lie by saying that the fact that an immigrant who arrived illegally in this country killed this young, pretty white nursing student, then that means that immigrants are killers. And they tar and feather the entire population with that garbage. And of course, their standard bearer, says it in the most harsh terms, the most racist terms. I mean, this is the very definition of racism. This is dictionary definition racism. When they have to put in every headline, illegal migrant, illegal alien kills beautiful young college student. Imagine, what else is the guy? Was he raised Catholic? So why don't you say Catholic kills young student? Maybe he was an orphan. Let's tar and feather all orphans. What else was he? Left-handed. Left-handed man kills woman. We better do something about these left-handed people. It's just pure racism. And just go right on down the line of what the right wing in this country wants. For those who want to cut Medicare and Social Security, let's remind them that life expectancy in the U.S. is 79 and dropping. 79 overall. For males, for white males, it's 73. For black males, it's 66. For American Indian and Alaska Native males, it's 61. And you want to raise the retirement age to what, 72? Yeah. The whole vax thing, we got measles breakout in Florida now because the wackos down there just insist on demonizing vaccines. We got the Supreme Court blocking every regulation they can find. They're making the Environmental Protection Agency absolutely powerless to do anything. CPAC just happened. Oh, Lord, did you see any of that? Mark Levin, who's, I guess, a radio guy, quote, "This is a battle between good and evil. We are good, they are evil." Don't even try to, put this in any kind of code or talk around it. No, they just come right out and say it. The insanity. Quoting the Orange Menace, November 5th, it will be our new Liberation Day. But for the liars and cheaters and fraudsters and censors and imposters who have commandeered our government, it will be their judgment day. This just Hitlerian speech. And the only issues they have, they thought they had the economy and the border. And they don't have the economy anymore. Although I'm going to save that for next week. We have to talk about the economy. Right now, I'll just mention quickly as it relates to the election. The Republicans are going to still try to make it an issue, but they just have to completely 100% lie in order to make it an issue. Because by every number, the United States has the best economy in the world. We're beating everybody. We're beating Europe. We're beating China. Now, the Democrats, their problem is that they want to rely on those numbers. They want to rely on all the macro numbers. Unemployment, wages going up a little bit. Of course, the stock market is doing great. GDP. They want to look at all these numbers. But numbers don't define someone's day-to-day life. So Democrats have always had this problem. I remember back when Clinton was running for re-election, and there was a cartoon that I never forgot. It's some big speech in a big hotel ballroom. Clinton is bragging about all the jobs he created. And one of the waiters, one of the servers, looks up and thinks to himself, yeah, I've got 3 of them. And I just saw a meme that repeated that. The economy is going great. We created 5 million jobs this year. And the McDonald's worker says, I have 3 of them and I still can't pay my rent. Yeah, that's either a coincidence that 2 people thought of the same idea or stolen, but the fact remains it's true. Democrats have to ask people to deny their own eyes and ears and their own pocketbooks and their own bank accounts. The macro numbers don't match the lived experience. And also, I heard a Democratic strategist bragging that personal satisfaction when polled, what's your personal satisfaction, is in the 50s and 60s. And he was bragging about this. But you know what? If people who are personally satisfied with their own financial condition are in the 50s and 60s, that means that the people who are not satisfied are in the 30s and 40s, percentage-wise. That's a whole damn lot of people in a country of 360 million people. Okay? It's not good enough. It's not good enough that polls in the 50s or low 60s. It's not good enough. You got tens and tens of millions of people. Well, let's see. Let's do some quick math here. If it's just a split of close to 50, what's half of 360? 180 million people. So maybe put them in their favor. There's still maybe 150 million people, certainly well over 100 million people who are not satisfied. It's not good enough. And every day there's more headlines. Rural hospitals, again, people's lived experience. New study finds hundreds of rural hospitals at risk of closure. Things just aren't working. People can't pay for childcare. They can't pay for college. And yet we see it every day. We look around and say, well, what about all these people shopping and flying around the country to take vacations? And sure, I just saw it in my social media feed this morning. One of my family members had taken a nice little trip. Yeah, 50 to 60% of people are very happy, doing great. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. Well, we're out of time for today. Let's see, maybe pick it up from there next time. We really need to talk about the economy, not only just how it relates to this election, but what we have to do to get things right. And I'd feel irresponsible if I didn't mention here, just a reminder, again, I'm a social anarchist. We shouldn't have a president with all this much power in the first place. We shouldn't have money ruling our lives the way it does. So let's talk about some alternatives next time, especially when it comes to the economy. And then we'll continue to a little bit about, we do have to spend a little time talking about just how crazy and insane it would be to reelect the Orange Menace. I'm not a fan of Joe Biden. This is the election that nobody wants. I mean, when 70% of Americans polled say they're unhappy with the choices we've been given. So let's talk about that too. The system just doesn't work. It is just completely unfair that we're given this choice. And then plus coming up here, by the time we speak again, the government may or may not have shut down partially. That's possible for the end of this week. There's a possible ceasefire that could happen as early as this weekend as I speak. And then Super Tuesday, as I mentioned earlier, that's March 5th, and Genocide Joe's State of the Union, March 7th. So when we speak again, all of that will have happened. So there you go. The usual closing notes. This program can be heard on any of your favorite podcast platforms, or go to the website, charlespurcell.com. Everything's there. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Write me at charlespurcell@gmail. Follow on Facebook. And for writing and performing our theme song, thanks to Peter Donalds. All right, that's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. See ya.